Mental illness is like a black hole, you know? It's there. One way or another, it's gonna suck you in.
My name is Joëlle Pouliot. I'm a journalist and a mental health advocate, and I also live with bipolar disorder. Mental illness is often called a selfish disease. As a patient, you sometimes need regular care and support from the people around you. But what happens when your needs start to hurt the caregivers who are putting their life on hold to help you get better? What comes to mind when you hear the word resilience? As caregivers and patients suffering from mental health issues, you've no doubt seen media posts and videos claiming that the secret to curing mental illness is just to be strong. Even during my own recovery, I was sometimes told that all I needed to be was more resilient. But in the real world, resilience is hard to build. On the way to resilience, there's a path filled with emotions, including resentment.
When you're dealing with someone who has bipolar disorder, it's easy to feel angry at them, at their behavior. Sometimes the behavior is really, really hard to deal with.
Elle m'a souvent mise en colère par rapport à des choses que je savais que c'était pas la bonne voie. Mais en même temps, il faut la traiter non pas comme un enfant, c'est une femme, c'est un adulte.
As a person dealing with mental illness, your expectations of your caregivers are often unattainable. Reading back through my journals from the early days of my illness, I realized the extra and sometimes unfair pressure I was putting on my own family. I feel so conflicted right now. I'm so angry and hurt by Mom and Dad. I know they care so much about me. I care so much about them, and I'm afraid of hurting them. How do you tell your parents that they're doing it all wrong?
So I think when we're looking at resources for caregivers, one of the things that struck me is that I think people have different needs at different times. For example, they've been in a caregiver role well before the person ever had their illness diagnosed. So I think at that particular point, there's issues of guilt, of frustration, maybe of despair. Really, that is a whole new phase for them.
The people that come into our support group, the first thing that they say is usually that they're not sure if they're supposed to be there. They're not sure if they do enough to be a caregiver. I see less anger or frustration, and it's really kind of that dam break moment for them where they're finally venting a little bit.
Resentment is like cancer for caregivers. It eats away at them from the inside until the damage is really hard to repair. The Canadian Psychology Association found that nearly 50% of caregivers report symptoms such as depression, hopelessness, and resentment. And that's just the ones who will admit to feeling that way.
With caregivers, there's a lot of guilt. Sometimes you feel guilty for being happy because the other person isn't. You feel guilty for laughing because the other person is depressed. You feel guilty for having a good time. It's a strange thing.
Mais oui, j'étais souvent en colère. J'étais souvent en colère, j'étais contre la maladie. Le billet de loterie malchanceux.
Caregivers often fall into the trap of believing they need to put their own needs aside, they need to be resilient, and they need to care for their loved ones. But to be the best caregiver often means accepting care for yourself, something that experts agree is hard for most people.
I often explain it in a way where I say, you can only help them as much as you have a capacity for, and if you're burnt out, you're not going to be able to help.
I used to tongue-in-cheek use a quote from a book I read way back when I was in medical school, and it was survival rules for interns, and one of them was the first thing you do at a cardiac arrest is take your own pulse. And I put that in to say, wow, look, even doctors have to take care of themselves to be able to take care of somebody else.
So I've learned that I have limits and that I'm allowed, not just allowed these limits, but it's really important that I respect my own limits. I think there was a point for me where I had to tell myself that I have the right to be happy.
I think that's another challenge for people to be able to begin relating outside of the illness framework, and then gradually also working with a person to maybe responsibilize them.
So what is resilience? Resilience isn't burying your emotions when life gets hard. Resilience is the process of adapting to challenging life experiences. Ideally, with time, you and your loved ones develop a level of flexibility and understanding so that you can be there for each other, no matter what difficulties you face.
Doing too much is a really typical thing for caregivers. And you do it because you think it's the right thing to do, and it's easy to feel that the other person is not competent. They can't, or they're sick, or it's really important to let the adult with the illness deal with their lives, make their own mistakes, let them make decisions. Even though you think you could do it better, let them do it.